Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we are doing the Steam fall list cleanup. This is part 2 of games starting with the letter T. I think I found a pretty decent middle spot to end last recording. It's been a little bit of a time since the last recording, maybe a day or two, so I'm a little bit more refreshed. The main thing here to recap is I have a fall list on Steam that includes a lot of games that might be good enough to be put on a wish list, which would mean that the games are good enough to for me to purchase and cover on my channel. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I look at new games that come out on Steam, basically all of them. If they look like they're kind of borderline, I will put them on the fall list. Meanwhile, I'm also playing Hearthstone and talking about video game news during those live streams. We'll be looking for games that have red flags, and we've broken it down into two categories: games that came out before January 1st, 2019, but have more than an arbitrary number of 20 verified purchase reviews. That's what this number is, that are in the, well, I guess positive or negative rating. If they're in the negative rating, they'll be removed from the wish list, but if they are labeled positive or neutral or mixed, I believe the phrase is mixed that is used by Steam, then they'll, if they're positive, they might go to the wish list. If they're anything else, they'll get removed. Usually when I'm looking at games, it's the exact day they came out, so they don't have any reviews. It's not a great system, but there isn't really a great system here. The other category of games we'll be looking at are anything that came out before January 1st, 2019, and as of the recording, that means they've been given at least 6 months to get at least 20 people to purchase and review the game. Or, I might make some special exceptions. I always leave that open to evaluation, and there will be some more elements we'll look at down below as red flags. The main thing I would say while we're up here is the images here make this look like an asset flip horror game to me, so I'm very questionable about this. There was a few games where statues were designed to be in a 3D environment and they would move around when you're not looking, a la the weeping angels in Doctor Who. Now, the first episode that introduced those characters happened many years ago at this point, so the fad or fandom of that, which wasn't a lot, probably has shifted back into irrelevancy. And I guess I really don't know if any of the statues in this game move around, or maybe it's just the humanoid figurines of the statues themselves act differently. See, that's this is a 99-cent game, which isn't a big red flag, but it is something to consider. We'll be looking to see if the languages are English and Russian only or English and Chinese only, because there's a higher chance of it being a low effort game if it's targeting or only supporting those languages. This probably is a low effort asset flip horror game. The problem now is it's gotten so easy to make a low effort asset flip horror game that looks good that it is really, really difficult to not just say they're all garbage. There's nothing we would really look in the description for. We might look to see if it has a single player experience. We might look at a game and make sure it doesn't have in-app purchases if it's a free-to-play game. I don't think paid games usually allowed for in-app purchases. And if we're still not certain, then we'd come over to the negative reviews, because I find positive reviews to be pretty useless, and see what But yeah, we'll look at the negative reviews and see what this is really about. Here we have, it's like a student project, maybe a first timer making game props on that. Scary, not at all. It's more like an exploring game with 3 jump scares in total, which you can see a mile away. The whole game takes place in a small room where you gather clues to solve a certain puzzle occasionally to find notes, and those notes can give you massive hints on what next to do. Too short. So yeah, this is an example of a game that I was being far too generous to even have on the follow list. So yeah, this will get removed from the follow list. Most of the games will get removed from the follow list. That's just the way things have been going. My standards from 6 months ago clearly weren't as high as they are now. On top of that, if we run into any adult games, I have this blurring function, so that's me, not YouTube. And I have so many Chrome tabs open that probably starting next page, all the images won't be loaded and we'll have to reload. Yeah, so that's, I think, all the setup we really need to do. So now it's just a matter of powering through games and considering them, mostly removing them. So the next game we have to consider is the Royal Game of Year. Now, I find it weird that Steam seems to have at some point switched how it handled games starting THE. Really, this should be a game that starts with the letter R, and then it should be comma the at the end. That would make a lot more sense, and it would split up the list a lot better. The only reason I have a long list of games starting with the letter T at all is because there's so many games starting with the as the first word. The reason I can see why this was put on the follow list is because I like to learn new games. This feels like this might actually have been a game from 3,000 years ago, or at least a artistic representation or recreation of a game that might have existed from 3,000 years ago. That being said, it has only 6 user reviews, which means it's not really relevant. Nobody bought the game and reviewed it. This came out November 30th, 2018, and it's asking $2.99. The graphics don't look particularly good. It's English only. It does have single player and local multiplayer, which is kind of what I would expect. There's 6 positive reviews and 0 negative reviews. Each of these people that bought it directly from Steam, but the reason why I want to see at least 20 instead of 6 is because it's very believable that someone could make a game, get it on Steam direct for $100, and then get 6 people who are their friends to write positive reviews. So this is a great example of a game that, even if it's great, it's not relevant. This falls even below the category of what we'll probably see are what I call single screen Unity games, or where the screen never scrolls. The reason for that is because at least most of the Unity games have very sharp imagery and is a little monotone and black and white in their design. This is more MS Paint style imagery, particularly these triangles. That doesn't look like that was made in a 3D modeling software as much as it was just painted in a 2D software. So yeah, just not a relevant game, so it's going to get removed. Next game we have to consider is called The Secret Puffin Cove. This is an early access game that came out December 12th, 2018, brought to you allegedly from the team that created Fable, which honestly I don't know what that would mean, because neither one of this looks like Lionsgate, which would be most of the people that created Fable. But kinda don't know what to do here. This looks slightly interesting, so this might be something you call a hidden gem. But it's a VR only game. It's $5.99. It's still in early access. I could give this 6 more months just because of the desperate situation that that VR is in. But that's kind of it. Otherwise, if this was a regular game, I would definitely make the sense. It wouldn't make any sense for this game to be on the wish list or follow list. As for VR games in particular, I'm almost certainly never going to buy a VR headset, so I'm just leaving a collection of good VR games, or at least seemingly good VR games, on the follow list in case somehow a headset becomes reasonably priced. This came in the description. Seems to indicate that this is a English speaking training game in early access, which is it is along the lines of something crazy that I believe it was Phil Spencer that was the main guy in charge of Fable and was always pushing the Fable series to be more feature creeped and bloated with features. Let's see. While practicing your English conversation, when done, we evaluate your level with a report. Yeah, I don't trust something like this. Particularly since this is targeted towards kids, because if the software is even slightly off, it could be blaming kids for problems that the software is having. And this would be kind of a software that would be targeted at people with speech development problems. Or speech impediments. And so this is kind of the worst idea you could possibly think of, is take the human element and the professional audiologist or speech therapist teacher, take the speech teacher out of the loop and instead stick them in front of a computer program that really could not be trusted. So yeah, this is actually a terrible concept. There are a few games that have come up and then disappeared, built around the idea of voice recognition, and before the age particularly of let's look at these negative reviews. Before the age of Siri and Google, speech recognition was very, very inaccurate, and even now it's not amazingly accurate. But yeah, people tried to make games around that, and I don't think a single game has ever actually worked anywhere close to acceptable. Finished this game in under 30 minutes. Got it in a bundle, so they activated it with a key, which means their review doesn't get counted. Game is basically a demo. Too monotone and boring in terms of some game juice. 2.5 out of 5. Yeah, and take note here, I'm out of so much RAM that I told it to load negative reviews, and it loaded positive reviews below that. Yeah, this is not a game that probably would ever come out of early access, not a game that should come out of early access. You can see this developer has made nothing else. You can see this publisher has published nothing else. And I would question how much of the team, creative team that brought Fable, that's not what Lionsgate let's see, if we were just to search Lionsgate in Steam, no, it's not Lionsgate, because Lionsgate is the creator of the movie series. It's Lion's Head. Must be the name of the video game company. Yeah, Fable anniversary here from Lionhead Studios. So if we go to their page, they're owned by Microsoft, and they've got quite a lot of other games that they've worked on recently that are coming soon, such as Gears of War 5 and Halo the Master Chief Collection, although this is just Xbox Game Studios in general. Lion's Head in particular are mostly, I think, focused on Fable games and some other games. Yeah, Fable Anniversary, for instance, in 2014, and they probably have got a Fable 2 Anniversary Edition or something that they're working on too. So it's really disingenuous to say you're the creative team behind Fable when you kinda aren't. Now, it is also arguably, as we move forward, that game of course is getting removed from fall list. It's arguable to say that some companies, quite a few companies, have a big success. A great example is BioShock 1. So the people at the top and I think maybe the core team that made BioShock 1 kind of eventually moved over to a completely different company, and yet there still exists a company by the name of whatever the name of the company was that made BioShock 1. It would be a better example if I could remember the names, frankly, but I've looked at so many games lately I can't remember anything. I'm also recording this right at the end of E3, and so I've spent the entire week looking at games. But yeah, my point that I'm trying to make, and hopefully I am somewhat making it, not just rambling, is that companies do have a tendency to stay around and not have any of the actual team that was there when that company became big. Usually successful people don't want to get pigeonholed and forced to make the same game. BioShock 2 was made by a completely different company because the main guy in charge of making BioShock 1 didn't want to make another BioShock, and then they kind of forced him into making BioShock Infinite, and then after that point he left the company and started his own. Sorry, I took a moment there to drink some water. I'm sure I'll be doing that quite a bit. So, names in the video game industry don't mean anything. And in a bigger thought, corporate names kind of don't mean anything anyways. If you look, for example, at Wendy's, like the Dave Thomas, who was the figurehead of Wendy's, has long since been dead. Maybe his daughter is now the figurehead person in charge, but certainly any main cook or person who made the original decisions to make Wendy's a slightly successful fast food restaurant has moved on or died decades ago. Same is true for McDonald's, same is true for Burger King. Yet the corporate entity concept, and particularly some of the garbage spewed by capitalists and uber capitalists in the United States, is that corporations are actually people. They would make the argument that McDonald's Corporation is a living human being with all the rights of the Constitution that has existed for decades upon decades, and yet not aged, and yet not changed in any significant way in which it should be treated differently. Of course, that has nothing to do with video games, and this is me talking, getting off on a tangent. We're evaluating a game called A Signal from Tova. This is a first-person shooter. It's 70% positive, which is a little low in the percentage points. We're usually trying to see 75% or higher. Basically a C, a B, and an A type score. Definitely not going to put something on the wish list if it's 51% positive. It does have 487 user reviews. It came out April 10th, 2017. It's not an early access. That's good. It's $19.99. It's single player only, which is odd because looking at this game, you would have almost certainly assumed that this was a multiplayer game. I'm not seeing anything here that has an RPG tag as far as the user-defined tag or roguelike elements, so it seems like you kind of just go through a campaign and shoot enemies, and that is that. That sounds a little boring. 42 Steam achievements is not too much for a $20 game. Sometimes we'll see some 99-cent games that have 100 achievements or one achievement, and if a game has one achievement that's easy to get, you get a 100% achievement collection, and Steam highlights that for some reason. And it really doesn't highlight if you have a bunch of achievements, so I don't know why the 100 achievement games ever gained any popularity. If we look here, 203 negative reviews to 429 positive reviews. That seems like quite a lot. Alright, here we have 1 to 30 minutes. The played are enjoyable. The game is fairly open-ended, where you can pretty much explore wherever you want. I'd love to play more, except the awful performance of the game gives even a 1063 gigabyte. That's a NVIDIA video card. It gives on that. Let's see. This looked fun, but after 30 minutes of gameplay, it didn't really pull me in. See, here's a useless beginning of a paragraph. I would like to preface this saying I hate to give games bad reviews. You shouldn't hate it. It's consumer advice. People need reviews. Game is very poorly optimized. This person activated with a key, so their negative review wouldn't count. This one wouldn't count. This one was activated with the key. Big empty spaces, slow moving characters, mad gameplay, missed stories, the mazes were cool. It seems like there's kind of a percentage of games here that were either given away for free or the keys were sold on a third-party site as a way of manipulating the reviews. Seems like there's a way you can get away with that by having, well, we can kind of show how you can do it right here if we show this graph. So at right about this point here, you could easily have a pretty high percentage, or even mostly here, you could stop selling the game very much on Steam and instead sell it via keys, so that the more negative reviews that start to happen start running and stop being considered. This spike here of 17 negative might be a little concerning, but a spike here of 28 initial launch, and then it probably went on sale or went for a big push. This is actually pretty helpful. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. And after this second push, that would have been a good point to start selling the key too. And by selling most of the games via keys, any negative reviews would not be counted, and you could lock in positive reviews. This works on the assumption that people would be more likely to rate a game negatively later on in its life, which is probably true. Also, you can manipulate the reviews with early access, so people might have been okay with this game when it was in early access, and once they took the early access label out, they decided it didn't have enough polish on it. And that's what this game really stands out and looks like, is a game that doesn't have enough polish on it. It's polished enough for me not to call it a asset flip game, although it's very possible that it is. The difference between an asset flip game and a regular game is just how well you integrate the assets that you buy. And this has like a Humble Bundle, Good Old Games links. So clearly Humble Bundle and Good Old Games, well, I don't think Good Old Games sells Steam keys, but Humble Bundle definitely does. So yeah, this can be removed from the fall list. There's nothing special about this game. Let's see, next game we have to consider is The Spy Who Shrunk Me, which is early access. This is a game I saw reviewed by, I believe, TechRaptor, which is a medium-sized video game review site, and it looked like an interesting idea of a game. It's 86% positive of 30 user reviews. The problem is it came out December 18th, 2018, which is definitely not a time to be releasing a game, frankly. If you did not make the release window for Black Friday, if you're not coming out before November, your game's not going to sell well. And this is still early access. So it really just boils down to, do I want to give this game, with its first-person shooter gameplay, with a slightly interesting mechanic in which you can shrink other people or shrink yourself with a shrink gun, do I want to give it some more time and hope that maybe it improves? I'd give it another 6 months. I imagine 6 months to a year from now, I would probably need to do another follow list cleanup. And I guess I could give it some more time. That being said, yeah, I can see some problems here. I can see that this seems like it is more of a joke VR game than a real game where they're committed to have a whole story and the whole experience there, or even a collection of puzzle rooms. Nothing here is getting tagged as puzzle. Also, they're working on a VR version, so they are definitely divided in their attention. And meanwhile, if we were to look at other games to consider, Stick Shards for Darkness is a stealth game that was kind of mediocre. Well, the first one was. I didn't like it too much. And then Dishonored Death of the Outsider. It's probably a pretty great one as far as a stealth game. And the original Dishonored 2 is probably a great one too to consider. Or just Thief. I believe there are quite a few people who are obsessed with the game Thief in video game journalist world and talk about games like Thief or talk about Thief all the time. Wait a minute. Why are we at S already? Okay. Well, next game to consider is an odd one because it's not starting with the letter T. It must have at some point changed its name from the Stones of Yalmurth to Stones of Yalmurth, which frankly is a better change. I remember putting this game on the follow list. I don't know why I did, though. In retrospect, yeah, maybe I was just very tired at the time. What happens is I'm usually running into situations where games, I've looked at 100 games already in a live stream, and my emotional energy is drained and I just can't make a decision. So I'll just say, oh, I'll be generous and put it on the follow list. Now it seems like, in retrospect, every bit of generosity really just ended up causing me more work. And had I been a bit more cruel, games that really had no chance of ever making it to the wish list would have not made it to the wish list. Also, things happened, certainly. There have been a lot of games that were put on the wish list or the follow list, and then I did a cleanup series at the end of 2018 in December to clean up the wish list, and after going through all of that, my standards probably significantly increased. And this is a game that's almost certainly an example of that. This looks like it is a puzzle platformer project that I really wouldn't even call much of a game or anything that is anywhere close to being polished. And yes, I have so much RAM taken up that I have to cycle through all the images once before they'll actually start loading. Yeah, this game has one user review. It's $8.99. It falls out of relevancy because of that one user review. Somebody here is writing the entire end user license agreement, which normally, if they wanted you to agree to a separate end user license agreement, it would be right here. Instead, they've just decided to put a end user license agreement in total at the bottom of this. There's a couple of free or activated by key reviews, and the one person that bought it. And this is just a Unity game. You can tell because it says Epic, and Epic owns Unity, and so they're using a lot of Unity assets, and they've just taken a Unity contract and put their own no, actually, it's not a Unity game, it's an Unreal Engine game. I'm saying that totally backwards. Epic owns Unreal. This is not the kind of game you would want to make in Unreal, frankly. You would have done better making it in Unity. And since Epic has since made the Epic Store, having Epic in your description is not a smart move, and that's all just hidden. I've never seen another game that did this. They just added a section for an end-user license agreement, something that you could easily say you never saw and it wouldn't stand up in court, as most end-user license agreements don't stand up in court. Contracts in general, this is getting removed, have to be somewhat fair to both parties, and most end users license agreements are in no way fair to the consumer. And if you have the money to challenge them in court, they can be dismissed in part or in whole pretty easily. Next game we have to consider is The Subject. For a second there, I thought I'd just actually run into games starting with the letter S, which would have been very confusing. So this is an adventure horror survival horror game, 82% positive with 23 user reviews. It came out November 23rd, 2018. Again, that would have missed Black Friday, but it's closer. Like, really, game publishers, even if you're a self-publisher, you should, at a certain point, just push your game towards a later release. It's usually pretty quiet in January and February, so if you wanted to release then, that would be a good time. This is $4.99. What I'm not seeing in the screenshots is an actual gameplay mechanic or characters. So let's look at the negative reviews. Let's see. Subject is incredibly obtuse. I'm under the impression the game is broken, and when asking for assistance, I was dismissed by the developer with the excuse that they've seen 2 other people complete the game successfully, so there's definitely nothing wrong, despite another person chiming in with the same issue and ultimately solving it for both of us. While the 4 main puzzle rooms are deeply logical, they mostly require brute force. Their solutions, think of those sliding puzzles to get from one side to the other. The rest of the subject's puzzles are a number of combinations and button presses. There's no real thoughtful puzzle crafting here. I played with the monster turned off. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to try and hide and run from the monster while navigating this absolute maze of corridors. It doesn't help that the recent implementation of the map isn't to scale, and it seems to be missing a fair chunk of the map. It is poorly color-coded, white, gray, dark gray, blue gray, and lacking any kind of map legend to age. I ran into a fair amount of bugs, such as invisible walls, randomly triggered voice lines, switches that wouldn't stick, so I could only assume they were the inoperable door that led to me wandering aimless for hours was also a glitch. Otherwise, the orb solution was intended and never actually set. It was never actually set up in the mind of the player. If it wasn't for the stupid AI monster interrupting your puzzling every 5 seconds, this game would be a decent puzzler. I love the idea, but the execution is lacking. Way too dark, as usual these days. Yeah, there's a lot of games that have what I call dark screenshot syndrome, and just in the screenshots alone, you can see there's no brightness turned up and you can't see anything at all. This game, actually, I would argue, doesn't suffer from that, but there's certainly cases where a game might look bright in the screenshots and nothing else. So the subject question, I guess, is this the subject or is this the monster? This is another example, too, of how you can buy so much Unity assets or Unreal Store assets that you can make a game look really, really good and still not really have any gameplay in it or any kind of polish on it to make it a good experience. And before Steam had the automatic refund under 2 hours, it was pretty easy to get somebody to pay $5 for a game, and then or I guess it wasn't $5 originally. Let's see. What do I want to do with this game? I think I can remove this because it seems like it's kind of a bottom of the barrel puzzler. Yeah, I don't think that there's enough here to make this interesting enough to play. And I would probably just prefer to go and play one of my favorite puzzler games like Portal 1 and Portal 2 again than play the subject once. And it doesn't seem like it has a unique gameplay mechanic, so you're not making portals, you're not you don't have like magnetic powers or anything like that. Seems like you're just doing some random things. So yeah, this can get removed. Maybe everything today will get removed. Next game we have to consider is The Technician, a VR action puzzle game about hacking your way through security systems, usually while being shot at. Now the graphics already look pretty rough, although the circuit board interests me. There was this game that came out and was extremely popular, particularly because streamers were playing it, called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and this feels like this is a clone of that game with shooting and being in VR. I can pretty much tell you that if you were a hacker being shot at, you're probably gonna get shot, or you're gonna expel a shell directly into the circuitry, and short circuit something or just shoot the circuitry. Like the closest thing I could imagine you would do if you were a hacker and people were immediately shooting at you would be to just grab a hard drive and run, not try to do a in-place hacking job while the power is still controlled. And this seems to be mostly fantasy, pulling what looks like a RAM, a slot of RAM out of a computer so that one could only assume you're manipulating or accessing that RAM. And the rest of what's on screen seems to be pretty much just gibberish widgets too. At first look, when you look at this, it looks like you might actually be doing some kind of electrical circuit diagnosis or evaluation, but looking at the video, you're really just shooting at things. And that's pretty much every VR game in a nutshell, is you end up just standing in one place and shooting at things. This is 100% positive of 16 user reviews. It came out December 10th, 2018, but it's still labeled early access. It's probably not coming out of early access. It's at version 0.3.1. They want $15, and frankly, it's ugly as a shooter, and it's distracting as a hacking game, so the two concepts fight against each other. I think what you would realize pretty quickly is that most first-person shooter games that do have scenarios where you need to hack give you a computer that will just auto-hack for you, and all you have to do is stand near it for a certain amount of time, not actually do any kind of hacking. As for what the circuitry looks like to me, it seems like it's mostly gibberish. Yeah, I have no idea what most of this would mean in the way things are connected. There's just not enough circuit paths and not enough things connected to pins. So yeah, the technician can be removed. Next game we have to consider is the Texorcist, the story of Ray Biba. Bibia, I suppose, as like bibliograph. This is 85% positive of 87 user reviews. The thing here with this game is I saw it, I probably wanted it on the wish list, but I wanted to put it on the fall list to make sure it had enough reviews. This was covered by, I believe, Giant Bomb, if not some other websites. So it got a little of mainstream coverage. That being said, it is kind of a weird combination of two very divergent gameplay styles. It is a typing game where you have to type in the Latin phrases to exercise the demons that are shooting at you in the middle of this kind of bullet hell shooter style game. There's also elements of kind of an adventure game, but you kind of have to type to go to certain areas or read certain things too. So it tries to integrate the typing element really fast. And quite frankly, this is probably a game that would have done very well to have a no typing mode. But I don't know how much of a game you really have here. This is clearly an example of some developer falling in love with a concept, falling in love with the Exorcist movie, and falling in love with a typing concept and sticking to it too much. Meanwhile, the best comparison to this game would be Typing of the Dead, which turned a generic, not so good first-person shooter into a slightly more funny experience. Is it called Typing of the Dead? Let's see. Typing and then Dead. Yeah, the Typing of the Dead Overkill is a conversion of an arcade light gun game, which probably would not have played very well on PC. So making a typing game was a way to resell it and make it kind of funny. I think that joke kind of gets played out with Typing of the Dead, though. That being said, Texas Risk: The Story of Ray Biba has enough reviews at 85% positive that I don't feel a need to really look for problems. I could look at the 16 negative reviews, but Mob Rule pretty much tells me to ignore them. Let's see. The game is hard for being the sake of hard, is one review. I type 110 words per minute, which seems to be too fast for the game to pick up every button input. Even when I slow down my typing, the game can't keep up and keeps insisting I'm messing the words up because I'm missing button presses. However, the game is amazing. So it seems like the game is implemented poorly. Yeah, this is a game certainly that could be a nightmare experience. It could be a game that you would rage quit from. You are integrating a bullet hell style gameplay, and bullet hell style shooters are not games for me, certainly. That being said, this will go to the wish list. I'm willing to purchase this, probably not at $15. I'd like to get it down to $5 before I would buy it. But I'd be willing to get it for $5 and play it for maybe as little as 30 minutes to do a spotlight and then never pick it up again. Next game we have to consider is the Tower of Beatrice, which is an adventure room escape game about an unlucky thief who stole a quiet babbling book. It looks like it's a point and click game, $5.99. Looks like it's got some puzzles in it. Now, I would call this more of a adventure game and possibly even call it a hidden object game more than an actual point and click adventure. Point and click adventures usually mean that you'll be dealing with characters and dialogue trees and conversation puzzles. I'm not seeing any of this. And calling this a room escape game is very disingenuous too, because while the main goal may be to escape a room, that's not really what a room escape game means. Looking at these screenshots, I find it underwhelming. Yeah, it feels like there's some false advertising going on here. 95% positive with 23 user reviews. Let's look and see what the one negative review is, I guess. Guess I didn't need to click that since the negative review was there. This is just going to take it longer to get through. Meanwhile, they're suggesting other point and click games that I recognize, such as Deponia and The Journey Down, and more episodes of Deponia and The Little Acre. Most of these are Daedalic games that are being shown. Let's see. Game breaking bug when the dwarf looks you up in the cage. That's not super helpful. This is a German, Russian, English game. Germans. Yeah, this game has an air of dishonesty, and it doesn't look like much more than a hidden object game without a hidden object section. So this can be removed. Frankly, it's questionable why that was even on the follow list in the first place. Next game we have to consider is the Treehouse Man, which says it's an RPG action adventure game. So You're riding on a boat, it seems, for the majority of this game. And then things start attacking you. And you're dodging those things. And then there's boxes that you can hit. And people you can talk to. What is your gameplay mechanic here? This seems like it's 100% dodge. There, apparently you have some way of shooting, but perhaps a limited amount of power or bullets. Some of this is being shown with a lot of darkness around the edges from the lantern, which could easily be confused for a dark screenshot. But in general, this is just not showing enough of a game, and it's very monotone visually with just black and then some color, some tinted color. Yeah, I'm not really saying anything. This came out February 13th, 2019, $6.99. And some of these games are getting reviewed high enough for me to put them on the wish list, but when I reevaluate them and look at them, it's not really that good. Let's see. The negative reviews. The Treehouse Man is the second game created by Hunchback, which also created a game called Gloom. If you like Gloom and think that game will be as fun, well, I'm going to tell you right now, it is not. The Treehouse Man is boring. It's a turn-based RPG with an active dodging system, which sounds like something I'd really enjoy, but the bare-bones story and repetitive combat makes the game a drag. Coupled with a soundtrack that I either didn't notice or wish I had turned off, there's really nothing this game has to offer. They also tried to go for some kind of creepy cute art style with something that looks like eldritch beasts, while others look like bales with a face plastered on them. I really do not know what they were going for with the art style, but it just looks unfinished. The entire game feels unfinished, like it was rushed out the door without any playtesting coming to see if the game was actually fun, because the game is definitely not fun. Don't waste your time or money on this, and probably don't need to read the entire review. Yeah, and that's kind of what I see too, is a game that's definitely not varied, and without variety you're not going to have much fun. A game that's not visually appealing, which is going to irritate me. Let's see what their other game, Gloom, if we can figure out what the reviews are on that are. Gloom, in comparison, is 84% positive with 287 reviews. It's Lovecraftian, and a lot of people are obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft stories. But immediately you can see in this game, you're moving, you're shooting, you're swinging swords, you're stabbing. There's a collection of different weapons you get. It's fast paced. It has more stamina bar and a health bar. Like, this looks interesting. Whereas the other game did not at all. And it's practically the same art style. So it's not even really an art style thing. It's just, what is your gameplay video showing as far as actual gameplay? So I'm gonna come over here to my notepad, which is what's over here on the right of the screen. I'm gonna type in add Gloom. That way I can go back and see if it's already on my wish list, or heck, I might even own it. But as far as the Treehouse Man, none of that. So yeah, without watching this entire trailer, by this point, compared to the Gloom trailer, you would have been halfway through the first fight that was shown. Here you're just seeing somebody stand, and that's it. When you look up here, he has only health and maybe a coin currency, where in Gloom there was a health, stamina, bullets. By the time you get to this point, it's a little too late, and you don't actually see this character shoot until several more seconds after this point. Also, it jumps out of the fight to show you the upgrade shop at the wrong time. Yeah, it's not until here that you see that you can even shoot somebody, which is quite ridiculous. And even after you see a couple shots get laid out, you go back to seeing video of him not shooting back, and then you see a little bit of platforming that you never see again, and then you go into this long video that just lasts pretty much the rest of the time of the video. That's just a really bad presentation. Next game we have to consider, spent too much time on that, is called The Trials of Olympus. It's a match 3 game from HH Games, which I believe is a publisher that is kind of known for putting out match 3 games. I see what I was going for here. I was considering the idea of playing a match 3 game that might be a little bit more family friendly, because right now my go-to suggestion if you want to play a match 3 game on Steam is to play the adult sex game Honey Pop. It's pretty much going to be your best bet. So yeah, the idea of going with the Roman pantheon and Olympians is not a terrible thought around the match 3 game. That being said, it's a pretty simplistic and low effort development to make a match 3 game, and it's a pretty simplistic low effort story to base it off of a well-known Olympian pantheon. $4.99. This is another red flag that it's a bad game because it's in a bundle with 12 other games for $30. And then it's also in a bundle with 2 other sequels for $6. And then there's a whole other bundle for $11.70. So a lot of bad games trying to be sold here. Meanwhile, Steam says play Honey Pop. That is the overwhelmingly positive review. Or play Gems of War, or play Bejeweled 3, which is the Bejeweled series is really the beginning of the match 3 games that you want to play. Or play 10 Million, which is a match 3 game with an RPG element. Voice acting is apparently bad. This is the most helpful review, and it's negative. Don't really need to go any further though, because there's no relevancy here at all. For a game that was released December 13th, only 1 user review, so that can leave. In all honesty, I don't think I would cover any more match 3 games unless there's a twist to them. I've covered more than enough, and match 3 games on Steam kind of have given away for match 3 games on cell phones. If a game is relatively simplistic, why not play it on a cell phone? I would like to kind of see Steam enter the foray and have a cell phone app that lets you buy or get cell phone games and connect to your Steam account, but that would be on the contention that if there was a match 3 version of a game, or well, a version of a game on a cell phone via a Steam cell phone storefront, there would also be a PC version of it so that you could play it anywhere you choose. But yeah, there's no indication that that's going to happen anytime soon. But it would probably be good. More competition would probably be a good idea. And a more curated experience as far as cell phone app stores would probably be a good idea also. Next game we have to consider is called the Universe Sim. I'm not a huge fan of Sims. Jump straight in managing your own plans as you guide civilization through the ages. Become the ultimate empire of Universe Sim, a new breed of god game in development by Crytevo. Is it still in early access? Yes. This came out August 28th, 2018. It's 73% positive of 1,653 user reviews over its lifetime. And in the last 30 days, it's 82% positive of 51 user reviews, which is not a huge jump, but a little bit of jump in the positive. Inherently, what I take from an idea like this is that it's just way, way too ambitious. I don't know how you have a universe sim uh, like this, because you kind of have to start with every planet being very close to being a spacefaring race to begin with, and there to be a pretty easy Act 1 gameplay that would ideally take less than a third of the entire gameplay to get into space, and then there would be space expansion, and then there would be like as Act 2 and space domination as Act 3. Most of what's being shown here is just one planet, and most of what I'm seeing is not a highly technical elements. So they're probably trying to start you at the beginning of the Stone Age and work all the way from the Stone Age to a space exploration age, which is just way too much ambition, way too much animation and mechanics and gameplay to have to program. And there was a game called Spore that tried to do the exact same thing. It was from like single cell organism all the way to space dominating species, but Spore took so incredibly long to play. I don't think very many people got past the first act. This game is at version 0.0.34. It's almost certainly never going to be finished. I imagine if we chromed through the 524 early access reviews, because everything is early access, we'll find some claims of it not being very finished or being abandoned. Not in its current state. Cannot play it long in the current state. Buggy control keeps me from enjoying the game. Yeah. With how unfinished and unfunctional the game is as you progress, it should only cost $5 to $10. Definitely wouldn't recommend trying it. Yeah, they want how much here for the game? $30. Early access came out August 28th, 2018. This is an easy game to remove from the fall list. I don't know. Perhaps I was being very generous to leave it on the fall list because I was applauding their ambition, but now in retrospect, having such great ambition as a game developer often seems like a bad thing, not a good thing. I would say at least 90% of every ambitious video game project I've ever seen in my life has ended in a unfinished game or a bad product. So I want games to be ambitious. I just don't want game developers to be hyper ambitious. I want them to think of one, maybe two, maybe three things that are new and innovative and put them in a iterative game otherwise. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is The Unlikely Legend of Rusty Pup. It says it's from the original creator of Conker's Bad Fur Day. That being said, that the company that made Conker's Bad Fur Day was Rare, which is owned by Microsoft. I think I'll be saying that for a lot of companies over the next few years. So this developer publisher Gory Detail Limited, I have no idea. Like, sure, this could be the original concept creator, but that doesn't really mean anything. Or this could be just a total lie, as much of that too. This came out October 19th, 2018. It was 100% positive of 14 verified purchase reviews. From what this looks like, it's kind of hard to tell what it is. Quite frankly, I'm seeing a bunch of circles. I'm seeing a pretty complicated mechanism system that pops up. It seems like there's different mechanisms that you can do to interact with different circles to help maybe a character that walks by himself, and so you're giving areas of success or hindrance. Yeah, so you might not be really controlling the main character, and this might be closer to kind of like a tower defense, if you were to make a tower defense look like a platforming game. Well, this game definitely has a problem of explaining what it is, and even though I'm looking right at it, they're calling it a puzzle platformer. Let's see, $8.99, English full audio, 33 achievements. That all looks good. Let's see what's, there's no negative reviews. I guess we'll have to read some positive reviews. Well, first of all, I'm not going to read a positive review that says it's like BioShock and Soma had a baby. Let's see. Let's try this one. Well, oddly, this is supposed to be the most helpful. Let's see. Comparisons to lemmings and creatures are not made in jest. Levels are repleted with deadly traps which make short work of Rusty, and manipulating the environment in Rusty's own behavior is your primary means of ensuring his survival. Rusty will frequently land atop crates containing platform pieces with various properties. Stone builds fast but crumbles easily. Metal conducts electricity and is difficult but not impossible to break. Needless to say, bridging gaps is the only the most obvious use you will put to them. Rusty is also terrified of the dark and will avoid it when he can. Fortunately, the underground is full of lights you can turn on or off to influence where he goes. Alright, so it's kind of like lemmings with only one lemming. And I don't think Steam would be very good at recommending games similar to that, since there aren't too many games like that. And yeah, seems like it's kind of making recommendations all over the place. Alright, well, this is the kind of game where I guess I have to make a special exception. It's 100% positive. It's probably not a great game, but it probably is a good enough game, and it might be a bit of a hidden gem, so I'll add this to the wish list, which is not really going to be a problem because so many games are getting removed. Next game we have to consider is the VR Museum of Fine Art, and the only thing we really have to look here is if this is still being worked on and if this still is good enough to be a VR game that you would want to get if I were to buy a VR headset. This seems to claim that it actually is the if it has Mona Lisa, that would be a high scan of the Louvre, and wouldn't be surprised if some of these are collections from the Louvre. It's free to play, and they've updated it to a second floor, although there's not really an indication. Like, this is an interesting idea, certainly, to have more pieces of art in VR so more people could see them and educate the populace. I'm kind of fairly certain that this is a combination of art pieces from different museums, though, because I couldn't imagine that Michelangelo's David and Mona Lisa are both in the same museum, both in the Louvre. And the Queen Dynasty Terracotta Army, I doubt, is in a French museum. And here's a high zoom in on I think a Monet. No. Yeah, I forgot the name of the artist. What I would complain about this, even though it's free, is it does seem to not really have a lot in it. And I've seen several examples of this same idea, sometimes free, sometimes for sale. And you really have to get the museums on board with this to let them have 3D pictures or scans of their art. And a lot of museums are, quite frankly, for lack of a better term, greedy and not upholding their spiritual, their moral imperative of trying to educate the world and get as many people to understand and appreciate art. And instead they're just trying to make money, so they won't let you buy like high quality images for any use, or 3D scans of anything, because they would rather hope that people would fly all the way to France, for instance, to go to the museum. And the Louvre is a great example of this. If you want to go see the Mona Lisa, there's not a day out of the year in which you're not going to be surrounded by hundreds upon hundreds of other people trying to see that same painting. And the painting's not that impressive when you're surrounded and getting squished by other people, and not that interesting. So it's not a good experience for anybody. As for this game, yeah, there's free-to-play VR game. If I was ever to buy a VR headset, this could be in the top 5 apps that I would install just to play around with. So that'll stay on the follow list because it's a VR game. Next game we have to consider is called The Wild 8. This is odd because it has gone from 72% positive of 3,479 reviews over its lifetime, down to the last 30 days being 38% positive of 21 user reviews. Notice that in the last 30 days they haven't even gotten 30 reviews. That's not super surprising when you see that this came out February 8th, 2017, and it's still in early access, and it's mostly a multiplayer centric experience, so I imagine there's not much as far as a player base. And yeah, looking at these screenshots, even though they're not lined up, loaded up, it doesn't look like much here. This barely looks more polished than a standard Unity asset flip simulator game. We could look at the negative reviews, but I imagine it is going to be pretty obvious that there's just it's just going to be like there's no player base and it's unfinished. Might be good down the line. This was posted May 14th, which is not but maybe a couple weeks as of this recording. Might be good down the line and closer to release, but right now it's not worth it. Terrible controls and HUD. All the items food decay so fast it's not fun at all. Going to wait for release and try again, which is rather generous and probably not true. Let's see. Don't buy yet, buy later. Very awkward controls, hopes it gets better. There is some fan base here of people who hope it gets better. More early access rubbish. Yeah. At this point in particular, though, I have no reason to give faith to a game that came out in 2017 that it's ever going to come out of early access. And you really only get the first impression once. So their first impression was February 8th, 2017. They haven't improved upon that impression or come out of early access to solidify that first impression. So yeah, this is a game that definitely, absolutely would be removed from the follow list. There's no reason to spend any money or time on this. $20 for this early access game is ridiculous. There should be more negative reviews, quite frankly, but I bet most people are smart enough not to buy the game. I could get certainly into my rant about if video game companies seem to only care about the first 6 months of sales, because exclusivity periods are usually the first six months when they're console exclusive or an Epic Store exclusive, and that seems to be the only time they really care to try to get a lot of sales, so that they can report it on their quarterly shareholders meetings. If somebody is only concerned about their 6 months of sales, then 6 months of early access is that first 6 months, and they almost certainly will not do anything more to finish a game or polish a game in most instances, although they sometimes do. Next game we have to consider here is The World Next Door. This came out March 28th, 2019, and I remember when I put this on the fall list, it just didn't have enough reviews. Now it has 32 verified purchase reviews and is 78% positive. If I recall correctly, this is kind of a match 3 game where you're walking on, well, I guess it's not so much a match 3 game as you're a Tetris style game where you're walking to places where different symbols would be touching 4 or more. Let's see if there's a screenshot that explains it more. And then there's a bunch of visual novel elements in this too. It's tagged match 3. It's also tagged real time. So, like, I think from what I understand, you stand here, and then that would do some kind of attack based on the color. So it would do like the pink attack, and then that would disappear, and then new symbols would appear, and then you run around to do it. So it makes a real-time movement game and fighting game around a match 3 game. More interesting certainly is this visual novel world of demons and monsters who are talking to you, and that certainly is the eye catcher, although it is kind of pulling a standard trope and trick here where it's making it look interesting for what I would call a Western tween-age comic book art design, for lack of a better term. I really can't call it anime or manga inspired, although there's maybe a little bit of inspiration there. It seems to be doing something very different from that, and that's cool in itself. It certainly seems like the main character may not actually be a demon, and instead is a human pretending to be a monster in this world of monsters. Anyways, this is $14.99, and single player with local multiplayer, and apparently they have a new game announcement. So yeah, this looks interesting. We could look at the 8 negative reviews, but I think mob rule would overwhelm this. Meanwhile, since it's tagged match 3, it's suggesting Battle Chef Brigade, which is another kind of version of a match 3 game, and a sexual content nudity match 3 game called Hell Girls, or Dungeon Girls, which is I think another sexual content nudity game. So it is splitting between match 3 games and visual novel anime games, and that's pretty much what I would have expected, bringing back Honey Pop, which frankly Honey Pop gets promoted quite a bit. Puzzle Quest. It's kind of hard, quite frankly, to run into a early child or family friendly match 3 game on Steam without getting recommended a bunch of other things. Although depending on how you set up your account, you could probably do that. Here we have one that says game just isn't finished. There's much to be desired. The game only lasts about 4 hours. I'm okay with that, frankly. Another review said the visual novel element of it's not that good. I'm kind of okay with that too. I get it. I totally get that this is probably the first game from Rose City Games, and they don't have anything else to even show on their store page. And here's a free Prelude comic, so it is around the comic. And I'm noticing now that the publisher is Viz Media, which Viz, if I recall correctly, was an anime publisher in America and manga publisher in America. I don't know if it's doing particularly well these days. I think it was Viz at some point tried to make their own website with manga that you could submit your own hand-drawn manga, but then Viz would own all the copyright to it and could republish it without paying you any royalties or anything like that. So then there was a whole hoopla about that. But that was many years ago. We've had a couple incredible contests and giveaways. Let's see. Let's see what the next game is. And now for the big news, we're excited to share the next title from Viz Media and Rose City Games. It's spooky, it's cute, the feline flinging frenzy, it's Cat Lady. Now there is a game already called The Cat Lady on Steam that is a horror game, so they've already picked a wrong name. So The Cat Lady exists as a psychotic horror adventure game that is very positive and well known in its niche. And I've covered it on my channel. So yeah, Viz Media, I don't think he's doing too hot these days, as it's trying to branch out into making video games. That being said, this game looks good enough. It's probably expensive. I really wouldn't want to pay even $7 for this. This would be a game I'd like to get for $5. But it's good enough, yeah. So I'll put it on the wish list. Yeah, unfortunately, it's just not going to get any better. So yeah, I may play 4 hours and be done with it and be happy to be done with it. I might play it for 30 minutes and be happy to spotlight it. If I did play it for 30 minutes, I would very much hope I didn't pay $5 for it, but or much more than $5. Next game we have to consider is Thea 2: The Shattering. I have no idea if I've wishlisted Thea 1, so I'm gonna have to just evaluate this game as it is. This is a blend of a 4X strategy, which I don't know what even the 4X's stand for. It's like expand, exploit, explore, and that I never remember. Maybe exterminate. It's a real stretch, and it's a blend of that, RPGs, and card games. And I'm always trying to keep my eyes out for card games, but a card game with so many other elements is far too complicated, and each game would probably be far too long to play. It looks like it is a card game in the card game aspect that is probably more simplistic than Gwent, and then it looks like it's a hex grid tile placement game otherwise. And then other times it looks like it's just a standard RPG. This is kind of the example of a game that's just way too ambitious and just has way too much stuff going on. Yeah, there's basically 3 different games combined in this. This is 62% of 100 user reviews in the last 30 days. It's dropped a pretty large amount, $25.99. The patch was postponed by 1 week as of June 13th. So let's look at the negative reviews, but I think I'm pretty set to say I don't think I want to play this kind of game because, let's see, buy Thea 1 instead. This is not a good game. I was a Kickstarter backer. Let's see. Most unpolished game I've ever played. Worst sound design. Half the buttons animations are completely silent. Killed an opponent in combat, no sound whatsoever. Let's see. Really long reviews. Yeah. I don't see games here that I want to play. Whereas Thea 1 The Awakening seems like it's maybe a little bit more interconnected and a little bit more simplistic. Although, in all truthfulness, I don't think I'd want to play Thea 1 The Awakening either, because it still feels like 3 different card games, or 3 different game mechanics, one of which is a card game. That makes it too hard. I think when I get around to playing something like Slay the Spire, or what is the other one that is very popular and takes forever? Darkest Dungeon, I believe is the name of that. Yeah. Once I get around to playing Darkest Dungeon and Slay the Spire, I would have had enough of the gameplay elements that are in this game to not really want to play any more of it for a while. So yeah, this can leave the follow list. Even if the first game is good, this is an example of me being generous and kind of just pig-headed about thinking, well, if I play the first game in the series, of course I have to play the sequel in the series. No, I really don't. I can totally skip games in series. If the third game in a trilogy is great and the first 2 suck, I can just play the third game. That's a normal thing that people do sometimes. Maybe I'll be a little lost in the story, but I can go on Wikipedia. I can read up on what's happening. Moving on. Next game we have to consider is called Them and Us. And this is from a company, publisher, self-publisher called Tendo Games. And immediately that name jumps out in my mind because I haven't heard of it, and it sounds like it's a Chinese developer. I would love to see good Chinese game developers put out good games on Steam. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad Chinese developers that put out bad Chinese games. Can't really call this one a bad one though. There's far too much assets here, whether these are custom created 3D models and art, or whether this is just someone who purchased a lot of things and placed them with love and care. There's just far too much here to call this an asset flip game or a low effort game, because clearly there was some real effort here. This looks to me to be a Resident Evil 1 clone, perhaps to the point of being a complete ripoff of Resident Evil 1, which Resident Evil 1 does exist on Steam, so there's not a huge argument or reason to buy something that is a ripoff of it. The remaster of Resident Evil 1, and maybe even the original version of Resident Evil 1. So unless this game gives you a different layout of a house and slightly different gameplay for the fans of Resident Evil 1, this is probably not a game you'd want to play. And I assume it will give you something different. And as long as it does give you something different, this looks good. This looks perfectly fine. It's early access. Came out September 7th, 2018. I might give it a little bit more time. It's $19.99. It's at version 0.3.0. Let's see what the negative reviews are. What other languages supported? English only, which is kind of odd. And would Steam recommend Resident Evil 1 or Biohazard 1 as it's called in Japan? Let's see. Someone asked him to give it a second chance. This was December 28th, 2018. The most recent ones. No stories or character development. This is like a half-baked bread. Seems like he's updating it, his review. Seems like the developer is responding to people asking him not to review the game negatively. Of course, when your game comes out of early access, all these reviews kind of get ignored anyways. So there's a lot of review manipulation that Steam allows people to do. That's inherently why I find most positive reviews to be useless. Only people who recognize that they're being critical and negative tend to say anything helpful or informative. So I'm stuck between, is this a good clone of Resident Evil and I should give it some more time and leave it on the file list, or is this just a shot for shot, move for move, puzzle for puzzle remake of Resident Evil and doesn't need to be copied? Controls feel a bit clunky. That would be exactly like Resident Evil 1. Let's see. My guess here is this is probably an example of a game that probably is nowhere close to being in a state where it should be released. I think that's what this really boils down to, and giving it more time would be an example of being overly generous. Quite frankly, if this game did come out, I think I'd probably hear about it if it was good. I think I'd just get more reviews on it. This does look nice, certainly, but every review says it's got basically no story, no polish, and it's had 6 months to come out in early access, fix some of its problems, and move on. There's just this one game from this developer, although they do have the new developer page. You know, at a certain point it might be easier for me to follow developers and just see what games they have available through that follow button and that follow list than what I'm doing now. But let's see. If I was to look at I guess Resident Evil 1, it's getting, I guess I have to spell the whole world Resident Evil. Now I just want to search Resident Evil so that I can find the Resident Evil game I'm actually looking for, which is here. Here we go. So, Resident Evil / Biohazard HD Remaster came out 2015. It is a full remaster, but not remake of Resident Evil 1. I think some of the DLC actually does add some content to it. It looks really, really good. I don't think you can play the original game, but you can certainly play with the tank controls in the remaster. So yeah, if you want that old school feeling, That certainly exists. And there's just so many Resident Evil games and DLC Resident Evil things. If you're trying to find the original Resident Evil, it's close to impossible. And the one Resident Evil game I want to cover is Resident Evil 4, and it doesn't run on my video card for some reason. So the remaster of Resident Evil 1 came out. This came out 3 years after that. Or maybe it didn't, and they just put out an HD remaster to replace the original version. Even if that is the case, this is a tough one. I guess I'll be generous, and I shouldn't be generous. This is the exact scenario that I keep running into. Is I've spent an hour and 35 minutes so far looking at games. I'm supposed to be acting critically. I'm supposed to be making decisions, and I don't really want to make a decision here. So I'm saying to myself, well, I'll just be generous and leave this on the follow list. I shouldn't. I should be cruel. I should say, no, this isn't good enough, and it should leave the follow list. That being said, I am going to leave it on the follow list. I'll give it 6 more months. I opened this game, Souls at Stake. This starts with the S. Not a game starting with the letter T. It is 75% positive of 3,870 games. Let's see, is this an online game? Yeah, it's a multiplayer online game, unfortunately. English and simplified Chinese. Well, that caught my eye, certainly, as a Asian horror looking game. Some of the graphics don't seem to be particularly good in the screenshots. This looks pretty good in the video footage, but how you make a video like this and then turn it into a multiplayer game is questionable. And this looks like it's a card game you're playing, unless that's a character generator. And once you start getting to the stationary screenshots, the actual gameplay doesn't look anywhere that good. And this is kind of a good example of Chinese developers have not really had to compete for decades, so they don't really know the level of quality that's required to the rest of the world as far as games. So yeah, that's a shame. That's a bad looking game, and a game that requires online player, because I don't review online games. It's kind of impossible as a video game critic to review an online experience, since that changes almost every time. Next game we have to consider is Them Fighting Herds. This is basically a My Little Pony fighting game. There's, I guess, not really much other to say about it. It's taking the concept, if you wanted to make a fighting game with a bunch of barn animals, and turn that into a game. It seems like it has some RPG elements to it. This is a game that caught my eye for being a little bit absurdist and different and weird, and it probably isn't the greatest fighting game ever. It's from Humble Bundle, but as a publisher, Humble Bundle's not really that important of a publisher. It doesn't mean that the game is going to be great. What makes it great, I would say, is it's 92% positive of 887 users, which means people kind of know what they're getting, and they don't feel that they're sold a bad game, and that their expectations have been met. There's definitely seems like there's some other elements besides just the fighting minigame, which is weird for a fighting game. This is early access, came out February 22nd, 2018. I guess this really does come down to a point of it being one of many fighting games that seems to stay in early access always. It says it's powered by GGPO. I think I've heard of GGPO, but I don't know if it's particularly that good. But online multiplayer certainly is something you would want in a game like this, any kind of fighting game. I guess I give this some more time. Again, being extremely generous, it's had more than 6 months to come out of early access and be a finished product, and let's face it, this game should just be a finished product. There's only so much you can do with this. It's mostly a gag game. Once you have it done, put it out, sell it. This developer hasn't made anything else, and they call themselves Mane 6, which I assume like a horse's mane, so they're kind of locking themselves into animal-centric games, or brony-centric games. But I guess, again, I'll be generous and give them 6 more months until the next fall list cleanup. Theoretically, the next fall list cleanup will be a lot less choices and a lot less time, so we'll probably be in a very good position there. Next game we have to consider is Thief of Thieves Season 1. This is 77% positive with 27 user reviews. It's Season 1, so episodic basically, and that is, I guess, the reason why I have this on the fall list, is I want to see if they actually come out with a Season 2 that would finish the story. $19.99. Let's see. We could mostly just look at the most recent posts. Let's see. The OG stealth gameplay wasn't good, however they fixed it. So the original people using OG to mean original instead of original gangster these days, I guess. I could look at the 9 negative reviews. Camera's the worst. Gameplay and bug fixes apparently needed. Season 1 is available now, and all of the 4-volume story is playable right away. Season 1 is based on his comic book series, created by Robert Kirkman and published by Skybound Entertainment. So my question then, does that mean the comic book series is not finished, and thus the Season 2 of the game won't come out for potentially years until the comic book series is done? I like the 3D art style mixing with the comic book art style. That can be a dangerous thing to attempt, certainly, but it seems like it mostly works. It's probably pretty dangerous also to try to sell a video game based on a comic book. If anything, at this point, I would say video game writers and your average random person has a better chance of being a better writer than a comic book writer is. Comic books being books that usually only have about 16-17 pages, let's say, maybe it's a little bit higher to 20-25, are written in extremely short, abrupt ways, designed to have the least amount of writing, the least amount of animation, the least amount of anything, and charged a premium as far as the price for comic books. It's not until you have somebody make a masterpiece that is a collection of 6 or 7 trade paperbacks that you have a good comic book series of even note, and really then it just kind of boils down to like the Sandman series, the Watchmen series, the Walking Dead series, and long runs, possibly of Batman and Spider-Man. There's very, very little in the world of comic books that is actually worth reading. For most people, comic book nerds in particular seem to find something. This is the developer that made a game called The Detail, which I believe is something on my wish list too. So this is a game that's in a weird position because it's selling itself as Season 1, and in the time since this came out, July 16th, 2018, well, Telltale Games has gone out of business, and Telltale Games was the #1 perpetrator of selling games labeled Season 1, Season 2, doing the Walking Dead Season 1, the Wolf Among Us Season 1, which never got a Season 2. Just like every game they launched, for the most part, was a Season 1 of something. And it certainly did not save that company. If anything, it destroyed Telltale because they kept licensing other people's intellectual properties and had no tentpole styles of games that didn't require them to pay heavy license fees to make a new game. Had they instead focused on something they owned, with like Sam and Max, and had a new Sam and Max come out on a annual basis, they would have been making more money that they could have relied on. But that has nothing to do with this game. This game, I guess we just leave it on the fall list, give it another 6 months. It is technically a finished product. I could put it on the wish list, but it's a finished product in the form of being Season 1. It's an unfinished product in the form of telling a full story. And if it's based on a comic book series, which, let's face it, a lot of comic book series never get finished either, there's a lot of question marks there. Next game we have to consider is called Thrushbriar Hall, which has no reviews. Well, one user review. It came out October 26, 2018. And this looks to me like it's almost certainly a low effort, or at least low frame rate and low polygon horror game. I don't know why I would have specifically even had this on the fall list. I'm not seeing anything. This is probably another example of, in October 26th of 2018, this looked like a somewhat polished horror game. By now, in modern standards, I've come to realize that you can kind of easily do an asset flip horror game that looks like this. This is $9.99. Can't see the enemy, have to run and hide all the time, takes all the fun out of the adventure. Yeah, there's no reason to even go any further with this game. It seems like it supports VR too, so maybe that was something that caught my eye, but certainly that doesn't stand up anymore. Yeah, there's nothing here. That's getting removed. That's an easy decision, quite frankly. Next game to consider we have is called Thunder Kid. Let's see. It's a shoot 'em up game with a cartoony kind of colorful art style, and kind of a low polygon art style. Kind of feels like it's an infinite runner in a way too, but then also kind of feels like it's just an asset flip. And I don't particularly see why a shooting down a hallway style bullet hell shooter, as we see what's going on here, would be a smart camera angle to use. $7.99. 12 positive, mostly positive reviews. Yeah, I don't see anything. More and more I'm coming to realize that I can't even trust games that are 100% positive. This is, I guess, a case of relevancy anyways. It's had 6 months. It didn't get 20 positive reviews or 20 verified purchase reviews. It only got 12. It doesn't look good to me. This game's getting removed. There's far too many negative things to say about it and basically nothing positive to say about it. Next game we have to consider is called 10 Hearts. This is 100% positive of 13 user reviews, so it's a relevancy game also. I believe this is probably a Toy Soldiers clone, and it looks cartoony and looks like it's going a little bit in a different direction, but you're getting this kind of cutscene, but that's not really what you're experiencing. This is the actual gameplay, and it's VR, I think, only, or maybe VR optional, but in early access too. Came out November 8th, 2018. Yeah, so relevancy is an issue and early access is an issue. I could scroll down here and see there are no negative reviews. This person has a 2-minute video review, which they only played an hour and a half in total of the game, according to Steam, which those metrics are not that accurate, but still slightly useful. This is getting removed, of course. Next game we have to consider is called Tiny Bubbles. Again, a relevancy game, 100% positive of 14 user reviews. I thought this might be an interesting little puzzle game, but I don't think I really need a game like this. The thing here is either I'm going to make a special exception because it's slightly different gameplay and it's a puzzle game and I'm a sucker for puzzle games, or I'm going to just realize that it kind of doesn't matter. Seems like what happens is when there are 4 bubbles of the same color, they disappear, and some other things that interact with things. An interesting thing I'd want to see here is there a number of puzzles listed? Am I doing 100 puzzles? Am I doing 50? The description: 75 bubbly achievements. So, but then 170 handmade puzzles, which that's a decent amount. That's more than you'd expect. As far as other puzzle games being suggested, I don't see anything that looks like it'd be particularly similar to this. So I think in this case I will make a special exception. It really is kind of more of a hidden gem game than anything else. It's probably not great, but it's not terrible either. So I'll put Tiny Bubbles on the wish list, because there definitely have been hundreds upon hundreds of other games that have been puzzle games in particular that have been rejected from the fall list. So I'm keeping things balanced, although that's not really the goal here. It's not to be fair and have a equal amount of puzzle games approved versus adventure and action games. The goal here is to find good games, and if all good games turn out to be first-person shooters, then I'll just play first-person shooters. Next game we're considering here is Tokyo Chronos. You can tell it is a dark storyline anime game. It looks like it would be a visual novel, but I'm not seeing actually any visual novel gameplay elements here. Instead, it seems to be a action adventure game. Well, not action game, adventure game. And I think the problem with this game is that it's VR only. So it's 96% positive and 56 user reviews over its lifetime. It's 100% positive in the last 30 days. It kind of is still a visual novel, but it's in VR, so it feels very different than a standard visual novel where you're just looking at flat images. It seems like maybe you get some decisions to go one way or another in the storyline, and then it will show you a cutscene based on your decision. This requires VR, unfortunately, and it was updated April 1st, which is the worst day to update things, although I would excuse a Japanese company for not understanding that April Fool's Day is April 1st. Full Japanese audio, subtitles in Chinese and English. Yeah, there's quite a few of these types of games. Chaos Child versus Tokyo Chronos. The Nunnery Games is another dark, like, puzzle murder mystery game. Yeah, this stays on the wish list. I don't know why I'm jumping through hoops here to say anything different. There is no way this is going to get removed. This is from Sekai Project, which sometimes publishes interesting things, sometimes doesn't. The one thing that sucks here is that I imagine a significant amount of people won't ever see this content, and it's a shame it doesn't have a non-VR mode. It'd be probably very easy to program that in. No real telling for the quality of the story, but I imagine at the review numbers it's getting, it's pretty good. For a VR game, that is a considerable amount, particularly since it only came out March 19th, so it's not been out for even a month. Alright, so this stays on the wish list, on the fall list, because it's VR. Otherwise it would be on the wish list. Alright, ooh, I think we've just hit a bit of a slog here. The Tom Clancy games are a big question mark in my head. I have no idea how many, if any, of the Tom Clancy games need to be played. I'm not sure how many, if any, are still relevant. I'm not sure which Tom Clancy series are really still coming out by Ubisoft. Rainbow Six Siege is being released and still maintained by Ubisoft, but that's mostly a multiplayer game that I don't think really has any single player story of any importance. The main thing I would assume I need to cover with the Tom Clancy series is Sam Fisher's story, Splinter Cell games, but I don't know if there's a full collection or any of those games are on Steam. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure that any of these games really need to be covered. I guess for the only thing I can really do is say, alright, this is 74% positive. It came out in 2017, so it's a more recent one. This should probably go to the wish list. And I just know that when a Steam sale comes around, I am very unlikely to put this actually in the shopping cart and buy it, even if it is greatly discounted. Although it seems like if you were going to buy the ultimate pack of everything, you're being asked to pay $120, which is quite a lot. Of course, if what happens next is what I think is going to happen next, we are going to find that the next game is also a Tom Clancy game. Nope. Oh, interesting. Alright, well that solves that. I would also say my understanding, which is not much, is that Ubisoft is really just using the author Tom Clancy's name as a way of implying that the games that they are making are good or have really any association to any of the stories he ever wrote. There is also an argument to say maybe he's not the best writer in the world. That could be it too. So a Tom Clancy game really doesn't mean much to me and personally, but I think maybe to your average gamer. It used to mean a lot more when Splinter Cell was coming out, and it has a chance to mean a lot more now that there won't be any more Metal Gear games that are any good. I'm sure of that. Next game we have to consider here is called Tombow. I believe this is from a guy who is kind of known for only making really pretty walking simulators. You really can't call this a low effort asset flip when you look at that. But I don't think there's really anything else to the game. So it really comes down to, is this game relevant, thinking that this is a walking simulator with 11 reviews that are 81% positive for $5. Let's see. Yeah, the game is meant to be an artistic experience and concept for the player. Roughly lasts 30 to 60 minutes. So then he claims he's donating 100% of the profits to something which you couldn't ever confirm. Meanwhile, there's What Remains of Edith Finch to compare it to, which is much more relevant, or Dear Esther, which is more relevant, or Firewatch, but then Firewatch I've blacklisted because the creators of the game threatened to DMCA PewDiePie for a bad reason, considering what PewDiePie did to irritate them had nothing to do with his coverage of their game or anything like that. And in general, if anybody threatens to misuse the DMCA, which is what they were saying they were going to do, they're gonna get blacklisted by me, and should be blacklisted by all YouTubers, for fear that they'll do it to you too, alone. Yeah, I can't really see how a small indie walking simulator game stands up when really there's the Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Like I've covered that on my game, on my channel too. I don't think that there's a need for another one, even if it is very pretty. Walking sims need to have a little bit more than just being walking sims for me to consider them games. This is really more of just an interactive experience, and I don't think you need to cover interactive experiences. And I guess that's true for most people because nobody bought it, so this can get removed. Next game we have to consider is Tooth and Tail. This is 81% positive of 1,783 reviews. Came out September 12th, 2017. It's $20, and I think the price was definitely a factor as to why this is on the fall list instead of the wish list. I think part of the problem here too is it's labeled as like a real-time strategy game, but it just didn't look very visually appealing to me. Maybe I should give it a second consideration. I think this is the story where animals are fighting each other to have the right to eat each other and dominate each other. Looks like there's a game here though, and it looks like people do like it, so I should probably put this on the fall list. Let's just make sure it has single player mode, yes, although it does also have online multiplayer, and apparently people are playing it competitively somewhat. Yeah, I guess Tooth and Tail I really don't have a great argument. Here's like a con: overly simplified real-time strategy mechanics to the point where it's a bad thing because it becomes boring very fast due to lack of challenge. That doesn't sound bad to me. No bots in online. So I'm not 100% sold on this game, but I think it does meet the standards. And again, when a sale comes, I'm probably not going to be very fast to put this game on the shopping cart and buy it unless it's really, really discounted. If I got it down to $5, this $20 game to $5, that would convince me to buy it a lot easier than like even if it was only $10. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is a game called Torin. Came out April 18th, 2019. It's a sci-fi puzzle adventure quote short game. It's a VR experience, so it requires VR. It's free. People seem to like it. 98% positive of 54 user reviews. Free doesn't usually on Steam get you a significantly higher amount of positive reviews. You would think it might, but it really doesn't. So this must be a particularly good and polished game for the VR experience. And since it's VR, I'll just leave it on the follow list. So that's just gonna get closed. And does where are we? Some of these seem like they are out of order. So Serious Sam Tormental is the next game we're gonna look at that apparently was called The Serious Sam Tormental, or was called Tormental, Serious Sam. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense why. It probably was called Tormental first, and then they added the Serious Sam thing. This is from Crow Team Incubator as a publisher. Crow Team makes the Talos Principle, which is what I know it by, and Serious Sam, which is what everybody else knows it by. In a weird way, I kind of don't care about any of the Serious Sam games. I only care about the Talos Principle games, which is only one and a side game called Sigils of Elohim, which was just kind of like a advertisement game. This looks like a top-down twin-stick shooter bullet hell game, something I would dismiss for any other game. I guess since it hasn't been given 6 months, I can leave it on the follow list. But quite frankly, if I have to get down to the point where I decide, am I going to play a bunch of Serious Sam games to see if I like that series, I probably wouldn't waste my time on it because I'm fairly certain I wouldn't like it. There is something to be said about this game as I'm watching it play, though. It does seem to be rather fast-paced. None of the enemies seem like they're too much of bullet sponges. You seem to collect keys, and you seem to have an ability to damage some of the walls. The walls have a tendency to keep it a narrower and tighter experience, which seems to change the play, how you play quite a bit. And the scoring system seems to change how you play a little bit. So there are some different elements from a basic top-down twin-stick shooter that I'm seeing. But yeah, I'll just leave that on the follow list for another 6 months or so. I wouldn't actually be surprised. I'm getting rid of so many games. I wouldn't be surprised if it really is going to be a year before I need to do another follow list cleanup. It really comes down to how big will the list be before probably the Steam winter sale, and whether I feel a need to make another cleanup video. Next game we have to consider is Total War 3 Kingdoms. The Total War series, I believe, has been centered around medieval England. type environments, so that bringing it to China is putting a different spin on it, and that I think was a successful move for them. 83% positive of 13,697 reviews. This is being published by Sega. Yeah, there's really no reason for me not to want to play them. Does that mean I have to come around and play Total War Warhammer 2 or Rome, Total War Rome 2? Not really. Seems like there's a long list of Total War games. Yep. This is really an example of a game more than any that somebody would almost have to gift to me. Like, a lot of games on the wish list are games I'd like to just own, or games I'd like gifted to me more than I'd actually like to spend money on them. But yeah, this in particular would be an example of, you're going to have to friend me on Steam and gift me this game if you want to see me cover it. I'm willing to cover it, but it is really at the bottom of the list, because this turn-based strategy game probably is pretty slow, and I don't really know anything about Chinese history, so I would be learning as I go, and this is probably an extremely long game. We could look here and see what the average playtime is. 149 hours, 45 hours, 203 hours, 42 hours, 30 hours, 50 hours, 107 hours. Yeah, so you're looking at an easy 100 to 200 hour game if you get into it big time. My only hope is that the single player, which it does have standalone story expansion, the story part of it is short, and then the rest of it is built around multiplayer, which I guess there's not even online multiplayer, so it may very well be 200 hours of single player gameplay. Ooh, that's a scary thought, certainly. Alright. Next game we have to consider is called Tower Hunter Urza's Trial. This is early access, came out September 28th, 2018. 77% positive of 345 reviews. So you have an anime looking thumbnail, or just a very nicely drawn thumbnail, and then you have the 3D character, who frankly does not look as good as the thumbnail, which is often the case, and you're doing a lot of platforming and jumping upward. They're calling it a roguelike Metroidvania type game, presented in a toon render style. Interesting way to call that. I don't know if I could really start using that as a phrase, though. I would just call it soft shading, maybe. Player explores a mysterious tower, mutant monsters, defeats bosses to acquire a hunter license, and become the most powerful battle maiden. So it looks good. I get the feeling that this game at some point had some nudity or sexual content in it, and maybe they took that out, and that would have been for the better, quite frankly, because this actually does look like a good game. And this is how you see her on the menu, and that would be a little distracting and annoying to see her on the menu this way and then look at her in the game like this. Seems like the brightness is turned way too much up on the character, so she's just always glowing with this bloom effect above her. This totally looks like a game if it was finished. Let's just... So, I guess I'm making another special exception. It wasn't until this point that I started doing this, but I really do want this on the fall list. I really do want to make sure I get this game if it's ever a finished product. It was updated as recently as May 17th, so there seems like there's a chance for that. There are some negative reviews. Let's see. It plays just like a Dead Cells clone. I'm pretty sure that it came out after Dead Cells. Dead Cells August 6, 2018. This came out September 28th, 2018. So that's pretty close to each other. I wouldn't really call it a Dead Cells clone. It's kind of silly to call games a Dead Cells clone anyways, because Dead Cells hasn't been out long enough for there to be any real clones. It would just be a Metroidvania clone. This other game, The Vagrant, is another game that looks a lot like this. Two bosses and that's it. Alright, well, I'll leave this on the fall list and just hope. That's really what I'm just hoping, is that this is a game that will get finished. There is a little bit of a fear here because it's called Urza's Trial, that it is kind of a demo for a bigger game. That would be annoying, certainly, if you, once it's out of early access and finished, you still only spend a couple hours in the game. Moving on. I'm taking too much time to evaluate each game, certainly. Next game we have to look at is Trax, the Toy Trax train set game. There were several train games that were, do you want to play a train simulator that would feel like playing with trains when you were a kid, if you played with trains when you were a kid. I personally didn't, so I don't have that understanding or nostalgia for it. This in particular is focusing on wooden train tracks and wooden toys, so it's a particular style and set of train toys, which makes the gameplay a little bit differently and look a little bit different otherwise. It's 91% positive. It's still early access, came out September 28th, 2017. I want to look at this one to consider if I'm just going to put it on the wish list even now. I don't know why it still says early access. Says there's a lot of players out there who love building with these types of train sets when they were younger, and it would be great to hear about what restricted them from building the very best train set that could. Having a community suggest objects will ultimately produce much more interesting games. So this is an odd reason to be in early access, to say we want the community to tell us what they want. The game is very much a sandbox at the moment, but some would prefer a more structured experience, and we'd like to hear from them what objectives or challenges they'd like to face in the environment. It seems to me like they really can't figure out when they would take this game out of early access, because they're nebulous as to the reason why. I really don't want to own an early access game, and there are some other games like Train Frontier Classic here. What's the reviews on that? That's very positive. Or Train Valley might be better. And Train Simulator 2019 is like the most expensive game you could possibly play, and not really a good comparison. If you specifically want wooden train games, though, I think this is your only bet. So I'm trying to think about this. 29 negative reviews. Let's see, recently posted, I don't like it, great graphics, mad gameplay, no Linux support, doesn't remember screen resolutions. I liked it for a while, but I got less interested in it. Fun lag. It crashed and there's no fix. It crashes. Okay, so yeah. These are the negative reviews that certainly would make me consider not putting it on the wish list, even though it's on the early access. Is the fact that it's a problem, that it doesn't run smoothly. It's really hard to buy a game like this and then say, oh yeah, get this game for your kids because they'll love to play with it, and then have kids play it and it crash on them, or not load up, or not save their settings, or give them any form of any kind of technical difficulty at all. If it is not a smooth experience, you will be hearing about it from your children. So you definitely don't want something centered towards kids to be unpolished, and that seems to be the case here. So instead, even though this came out September 28th, 2017, and it's been 2 years, I'm still going to leave this on the fall list, and that is extremely generous. That is a really generous thing to do. In all honesty, I should remove it from the fall list and just say this is abandonware at this point. Like, my only hope is that they very quickly, in the next 6 months to a year, finish the product and release it. Alright, moving on to the next game we have to consider. It's called Trail Breaking. Is this a walking simulator? It says you solve puzzles and survive danger to find your way back home. But is this just a walking simulator? Let's see. And these trailers don't play as fast as I would like to. Unlike YouTube, where you can speed up the playback of most videos, you can't really do it on Steam's videos. It's the only way I've found, at least. This feels very asset flippy. Feels like it's got some puzzles, but it does mostly feel like a walking simulator. Or just a combination of random things. More aligned in the line of a experiment or project than a actual game with polish and a single concept. Yeah, I don't see anything here. In the end, I guess it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. There's only 7 verified purchase reviews. It came out June 24th, 2018. Even at $7, that's nowhere close to cheap enough to make me consider putting this on the wish list. So this is leaving the fall list. Next game we have to consider is called Trains VR, which obviously, again, trying to think about VR games or think about trains games. And this is kind of cartoony, like a kid playing with trains, but it gets a little bit away from the wooden train sets, which are kind of popular. Well, it's not really relevant. It's 75% positive with 12 user reviews, and it's VR. So let's look and see if there's some negative reviews. There's apparently 3. And looked like it was promising, but once you get in it, you realize there's little there. Game fails to deliver in several areas. Developer seems to respond to a lot of things, which doesn't mean anything. I kind of wish that the developer's response would always show up at the bottom. There's really no reason not to load that extra bit of text. Hiding it under link is a waste of bandwidth, quite frankly. And yeah, there's more train games. There's quite a lot of train games. And playing with a train game in VR is an interesting idea. That being said, $15, while the price for a VR game is not incredibly high, is too high for this game, and this game's not well reviewed enough, and it's not relevant enough, so this can be removed. Next game we have to consider is called Transpose. I had thought that we would have actually been a little bit closer to being finished after we covered all the games starting with V, but that was definitely asking way too much. This looks very much like a Green Lantern person and Orange Lantern people. It's 100% positive of 16 user reviews. Came out November 6, 2018. It's VR only. Says it's a dreamlike, gravity-defying puzzle game in VR. It challenges players to solve increasingly complex physics puzzles as they explore an extraordinary, surreal world. This feels like a game very much where you are. They are using the concept of surreal worlds to hide the fact that there's just a bunch of asset flips here, and that they just wanted to put a bunch of random garbage on the screen. Yeah, I'm really not seeing anything here that's intriguing me. It seems like it's just potentially multiple VR people or bots handing off a cube left and right. $19.99, single player only, so all those other characters were bots. So wrap your head around that. Yeah, there's nothing here. Even though Metacritic gives it an 81% positive and it's 100% positive here, I see nothing. And that's true for most people, because only 16 people bought the game and actually reviewed it. So yeah, this is going to get removed. Let's see, next game we have to consider is called Trap Labs, which just barely has 20 user reviews at 90% positive. This looks very much like somebody is a fan of Jimmy Neutron and the Nicktoon characters. I guess I don't particularly care if you want to draw characters that look somewhat like that. This entirety of the game, though, seems to be just a case of, let's see, it says it's a racing game, but to me it looks like it's more of a mini game or a rhythm game. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's too much of a game, quite frankly. And while the art style might be slightly interesting, this is almost an example of somebody probably should have just written a fan comic or something like that to so that they could have just drawn characters like this without having to do anything else. Let's see. Guess we'll look at the reviews. Beat in 3 hours, the story ending just felt so ugly. Bought it for a friend and myself, and I was unfortunately disappointed. On the bright side, I can honestly say that my tolerance for other stupid poop has unfortunately increased slightly. Well, that's one of 2 negative reviews. I've played and enjoyed many cooperative escape rooms on Steam, and thought Trap Labs might scratch a puzzle itch for myself and a co-op player. Is this co-op only? It says single player. It says play the entire story, campaign, and co-op. And then there's 100 additional challenges if you wanted to do that. Game did not feel good. Character felt floaty. Controls felt as light as the controls do not feel as light as something like Super Meat Boy. So what do I go? What do I choose here? $10. 90% positive of 20 reviews. I guess Mob Rule. Mob Rule takes over on this point. This is probably something that I might rage quit through halfway, or I just burn through really quickly. This looks very much like a game designed for kids, but it is out. It's not in early access. It looks like something. Looks like a real game. So I'll put Trap Labs on the wish list. Again, probably would only want to spend about $4, maybe even $3 on something like this. And I definitely would suffer for not having any real fandom of Nicktoons games. Alright, moving on. Next game we have to consider is called Trap Shine. This is tagged sexual content, so let's go blurry for a second just to make sure all of these screenshots are YouTube friendly. Now, if it's called Trap Shrine, that means one of the characters is cross-dressing, and let's see. My guess is this character here is actually a male, and this is a romance visual novel on that aspect. Could be vice versa, certainly. Let's see. How do we evaluate visual novels? It's been a while. 90% positive, 490 user reviews. It's $9.99, which is actually a little cheap. It has full Japanese art. I personally have no problem with a cross-dressing game. Now, I'm not 100% sure what trap means to everybody. It seems to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In my opinion, cross-dresser probably is it, or in particular, a trap is a very successful cross-dresser who is intentionally misrepresenting themselves as another gender to trick a person, at least initially, into having some general initial attraction to them, versus, say, a cross-dresser like a drag queen, where their makeup is outlandish and they're pretty obvious. If you can tell, that it's pretty obvious to tell that they are cross-dressing. And there's definitely a lot more things you could dive deeper in into that, certainly. But yeah, the thing here is this might be a troll game. Seems like it's a pretty short game. Here we have a review. This is the visual novel in the strictest sense of the term, a story with graphics. There's no choices, no secret characters, no branching routes. There's a beginning, a bunch of porn, and an end. Give that your mileage. Depends quite a bit on how much you enjoy that porn. Okay. Well, then if it's not a video game, then it doesn't really fall under the category of anything I think I need to own or particularly support as far as video game. And I think that's where this falls down. This is being published by Ergo Japan, so that's not a publisher I've ever heard of, and No Strike is the developer. So yeah, I think this can leave. Like, at some point, there probably will be a visual novel, adult visual novel that comes around that is worth being on the wish list or worth covering. That does have one character that is a trap, or maybe several of those. But the story would have to be good, and the gameplay would actually have to have some gameplay in it for me to cover it as a video game. I do not want to move or shift or expand my career into being a critic of books or fan fictions or mangas, for instance. So yeah, that's not my purview per se. Next game to consider is Trials of Fire. This is 92% positive with 65 user reviews. Looks like it's an RPG game. It's still in early access. It came out May 7th, 2019. This is a case of a game that would go to the wish list if it wasn't in early access. So I really just don't need to evaluate it yet. It looks slightly interesting, definitely. But yeah, I'm just going to wait till it comes out of early access. So that goes there. Next game we have to consider is Trinity VR. And this looks very, very visually appealing for a VR game. But then it's 43% positive of 16 user reviews. So it has like no relevancy. And it's not well received. This came out November 20th, 2018. And I imagine what they're doing here is they show you a cutscene and then you end up standing in one place just shooting at things like every other video game. Let's see. I don't know if there's anything else to mention here. Did they say sci-fi SYFY? Sci-fi? No, it's sci-fi. Spelled the right way, so it's not related to the sci-fi channel. Alright, well, let's look at the reviews, but I think it doesn't really matter. This is going to get removed. Let's see. 9 negative reviews to 7 positive ones. It's short and boring. The trailer made me think I'd watch something great with some passion and action scene. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You're watching strange people moving slowly and watch them watch you. If the video was free, I would recommend it either. I lost several minutes for nothing downloading and watching the 15-minute video. Too much 360 video versus actual 3D content. The 3D content is the weird point cloud effect that isn't very convincing. Nice attempt at doing something different, but I've seen 3D 180 videos that look better than this. Is this not even interactive? Doesn't seem like it actually is. Well, yeah, this is getting removed. Mob rule. Alright, next game we have to consider is another game tagged sexual content. So let's go blurry for a second just to make sure all the screenshots are YouTube friendly. I think they will be. Yep. Okay. So next game to consider is Trino Line All Ages version. Anything labeled All Ages version is part of Manga Gamer. It seems to be this is their new their role of selling games, visual novels, is that they're putting all ages versions on the Steam storefront and then a uncensored version on their website or an uncensored patch on their website. I saw some talk that you might have to make an account on Manga Gamer to get the patch, which would kind of suck to have to give your email to somebody you don't want to give it to. Let's see. This is going for the moe anime style where the characters' proportions are really short, and it tends to be interpreted as characters that look really young. They're cartoons, I don't care. And like this image, if it was drawn yesterday, would be 2 days old. The same is true for any other image. The characters can be whatever you want. That's the beauty of fiction. This is $34.99, so apparently even at that high price, people are liking it. And if I am going to play an all ages version on Steam, that makes it a lot easier to cover a game like this as a visual novel if it's already pre-censored. So I'm kind of struggling to figure out a reason why not to put this on the wish list. Actually, there's 2 negative reviews versus 40 positive ones. Only 1 is in English. Alright. Yeah, I think I just go with mob rule here. This seems to be what people think it is. It seems to satisfy the audience that buys it in a pretty big amount. This came out April 18th, 2019, so it hasn't even been out that long. So yeah, this goes to the wish list because it follows all the other rules. It's a little weird, and most certainly there would be a good portion of people who are not into visual novels, or not into anime, or not into anime visual novels with sexual content, or not into moe young looking characters. There's like a whole list of people who wouldn't be into a game like this, but the niche certainly exists, and for the niche that does like these types of games, this one seems good. And again, I would say any adult game on Steam that if it was gifted to me, I might not very well ever have an opportunity to put it on YouTube or cover it. I might have to think of a more abridged experience instead. But these are still the kind of games I want to support. I want these kind of games and these kind of businesses to succeed and continue to make the products that they want to make and express their artistic free speech as much as possible. So yeah, as much as I want to support the industry for making any kind of games, I want to support the industry for making games that are less likely to be successful because of ridiculous censorship reasons, or I don't know how else to say it. I'll get into a rant if I keep on talking about it. So next game we have is a game called Troubleshooter, which looks like it's a Persona-esque RPG that that somebody made, but not like a AAA developer. So it's a very ambitious looking tactical strategy game. But it looks like it might actually have a game here. This is 89% positive of 758 reviews, but it came out December 30th, 2017. So the question, I guess, would come down to, is this game ever going to be finished? Or is this game in a state that I could maybe cover it unfinished, which would be weird, and a special exception, definitely. Really don't want to play an RPG that's unfinished. But it's been in early access for 2 years. Why not just finish it? Says it's still under development, is in alpha stage. Let's see what the most recent reviews have to say. Usually don't purchase early access nor do I post reviews about them. This game has so much potential that if we can just get rid of the slow initial loading and slow the phase of the dialogues, it would be perfect. The devs keep up the work. I think it's supposed to say, I hope the devs keep up the great work. Let's look at the negative reviews. I've been playing the game for 10 hours and not only do new things, gimmicks mostly keep popping up. That's kind of typical for an RPG. I still don't have a firm grasp on things because it's throwing so much information at it. This is not XCOM with an anime twist. It's Fire Emblem with nice drawings, boring story, bad translation, and grindy mechanics. So this feels like a game. Is there anything it would recommend that I wouldn't have seen before? Disgaea, for instance, would be a great JRPG tactical placement game instead to play. It's finished. Or Disgaea 5, if you want the most recent one, or Disgaea 2. I'll look at this game too. That might be a good JRPG too. It's a shame. I think I'm going to just make a really special exception here. And clearly I'm emotionally exhausted. It's been 2 hours and 46 minutes. So by any right, I should give up on this game and just say this game is never going to get finished. The one thing I could make as an argument is because it is so ambitious, it has just taken so much time to try and finish the project. And it is super popular. So I'll leave it on the follow list for that reason. But boy, is there not really a good reason to have faith that this is going to get finished. It almost becomes a joke. Will Troubleshooter come out before the next Final Fantasy remaster comes out? Which I guess is a fair comparison. Meanwhile, they're suggesting playing this game, Himiko Satori, which is also early access. So, I actually think this game might actually be on the follow list. So, I'm going to add it to the follow list. Alright. Next game to consider, starting with the letter T, we have Truberbrook, which is 70% positive of 175 user reviews. It's a point-click adventure game. That's not a particularly high rating, so I'm gonna look at the reviews. As far as what it looks like, if anything would load, it seems like it's kind of a uniquely art-styled. I like that the camera zoomed in pretty well. Point-and-click adventure. $29.99 might be pricing it way too high. That could be part of the problem. They're comparing it to Black Mirror, which I've covered everything except for the remaster of Black Mirror, I think, and not liked any of it as far as a point-and-click series. Or Broken Sword, which I liked the first couple of Broken Sword games, but I didn't like 5. I think maybe in my old age I'm losing my love for point-and-click adventure games. But even Broken Sword 1 and 2, the remastered versions that you're allowed to play on Steam are not as good as the original versions. So there's some research you kind of have to do and go, oh yeah, you should play the original Broken Sword 1 and 2, not the remaster. Come on, is anything gonna load? None of the negative reviews are actually in English. Oh, so here's one. It is beautiful, no doubt, but boy does it have bugs. The mouse is super slow and sluggish, making aiming an act of luck. The game saves a non-intuitive. This came out March 15th. Beautifully crafted, but get it on sale. Game is short. Finished the game at 7 hours, and that includes an extra hour and a half from when I restarted after finishing the first chapter. It's buggy and unfinished, says this review. Alright, so I have to make a decision here. Do I want a buggy and potentially unfinished game? For $30. It came out March 12th, 2019. No, I think this prices it out of any realistic amount. Frankly, $30 for a point-and-click adventure game is asking too much to start with. When you later find out that it's 7 hours of gameplay for $30, that's way too short. It should be closer to 30 hours of gameplay on average if you're going to charge $30. So yeah, this thing just has too many strikes against it, so it's going to get removed. There's a lot of point-and-click adventure games, and a lot of them are bad. Next, we have a game here called Tunic that either isn't out yet or was out for sale, and I would assume it isn't out yet because it would have some reviews or something. Looks like an interesting game, but there's kind of no point to have games on the fall list if they don't have release dates, so this will get removed. Next game we have to consider is Turn Tack, which came out December 10th, 2018. So still early access, yes it is. So this looks like an asset flip horror game, and it doesn't look particularly interesting or special. It's just a matter of my standards being low previously. Seriously, are these images not going to load? Yeah, there's kind of nothing here. And you're getting keyboard prompts. I kind of like the glowing white hair with the black silhouette character. It's a slightly interesting idea. But everything else here is pretty low effort. $9.99, English and Korean. The achievements have letters in them, which is suspect too, although there aren't enough achievements to actually spell out have all 26 letters of the alphabet. Yeah, this can get removed. Easy decision. We probably are close to the end. I can't imagine there's too many more games starting TW. Next game to consider is Twilight Path, a virtual reality fantasy adventure set in a surreal realm. Surreal again, between real worlds and afterlife. Meet mischievous spirits, gods, solve puzzles, restore ancient stone structures, explore gorgeous and vibrant worlds. It's a VR game. It doesn't look terrible, and I really can't just call it a low effort asset flip. There looks like there's something here. Let's watch this full video. Let's see, it's $14.99. There is something to be said about a game that looks like it goes in wide different directions visually. There's something weird about that and something I really wouldn't trust. It's 85% positive of 56 user reviews. Let's look at the negative reviews, but I think we'll probably leave this on the fall list. If you liked Form, then you'll probably tolerate this one, but it's basically the same stuff and a different wrapping. But if you didn't like Form, you're absolutely going to hate Twilight Path. Don't know what Form is. Those two games have a lot of similarities. Is there a game being mentioned or referenced called Form? Here's a game that came out relatively recently, Zed, that was well received. Yep, it's still not well received. So, is there a game called Form? Yes. Alright, so we might look at that. Nice visuals, but other than that, very disappointing. The game is extremely short and the puzzles are very underwhelming. Oh, the two games are bundled together. So people loved Form, people hate this. So let's go look at Form. Form, in comparison, 92% positive of 598 user reviews, and it does seem to me like one of these games had more work put into it. Yeah. A lot more consistent artwork and detail. Feels like it's all from the same universe. I don't really see how there could be a business model around making an intentional bad game and then making an intentional good game and bundling them together. I assume that people who develop games simply have hits and misses and bundle them together after the fact. That's about the only thing I could guess from that. Yeah, Form looks good. This, not really as much. From the same developers. A year later. And Charm Games, did they make anything else in between? No. I think this can easily leave the fall list. It's a VR game anyways, so I'd almost certainly never play it anyways. So I'll take that off. Alright, next game we have to consider is called Twinfold. A roguelike about merging golden babies and squashing angry faces. This is sort of like 2048, but with puzzle walls, I guess. This might be a slightly interesting game, but it might not. This might just be kind of ridiculous, too. It says 2 reviews. Came out December 5th, 2018. It's $5.99. They're procedurally generated puzzles, so they just keep on going. 40 unique skills, 7 enemy types, 6 well thought out bullet points. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a 6th bullet point there. Let's see. There's 4 reviews, all positive. It's like crossing 2048 and Into the Breach. Like, I really can't trust any of these positive reviews, frankly. And the price is way too high at $6. And it kind of doesn't matter, it's just not relevant. This developer, have they made anything else that might make it relevant? You have a positive review, a reviewed game with 20 reviews. A positive reviewed game with 43 reviews. Positive game with 169 reviews. Yeah, I don't know. Seems like you're just asking too much. Yeah. Yeah, this really just is priced way too high. at $6 it would have to go down to $3, and even after that it would have to go down to $1.50 before I'd consider it, and I kind of don't think it would go on that price. And even then, even if I could get this for 59 cents, 2048 as a fad of mobile games has been done. I covered at least one 2048 game on my channel already. I don't know if there's really a need to cover another one, even with some slight differences. And yeah, people certainly aren't interested in playing 2048 that much these days. So this can leave the fall list. Next game we have to consider, and I'm surprised how many games we've run into starting with TW, is Twisted Arrow. This is 88% positive of 77 user reviews. This is a VR shooting game where you stand in one place and shoot. It is archery. Arguably, I have seen better graphics, but I haven't seen a better gameplay. Like, this actually looks like this might be a more thought out gameplay experience than what I've seen for most other games. This might also, though, be just an asset flip game. If they bought the asset of a bow and they bought the assets of explosions and zombies, it would explain why there's not really a thematic visual consistency going on in this game. It seems to kind of waver between a realistic metallic look and a cartoony zombie look. This came out March 28th, 2017. It's $14.99. Let's just quickly look at the negative reviews. Otherwise, I think I'll leave this on the fall list. And there's a decent chance that next time I do a fall list cleanup, I probably won't look at VR games at all. That's a pretty good possibility. Maybe that would be a problem eventually, but I could probably skip it once a year, or just make special VR games. Let's see. They're selling some kind of other game, either another game or a piece of equipment, like a physical piece of equipment called the Knock and Load. I'm looking at these negative reviews. I don't see anything too bad about this game. I'll leave this on the fall list. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is called Twisted Enhanced Edition. One review came out April 26, 2018. So this game has no relevancy. And this looks very much like it is Headlander, a game that came out. Well, it looks somewhat similar to that. I guess there was nothing too special about that game. Yeah, a clever action platformer game combined with the best gameplay elements and object manipulation. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here. And there's a game called My Friend Pedro that's been in development for quite a while that looks like it would be a much better version of this game anyways. There's very little to consider here. Early access for 6 months. It's got one verified purchase. It's not relevant. It's leaving. Next game we have to consider is TYR Chains of Valhalla. Everything I said about the last game could be said about this game, although it does have a cartoony intro animation, which shows a little bit more polish, but that's kind of it. A fancy thumbnail. This looks like a platformer shooter game. Let's see. Question is, can I convince myself that this is a hidden gem and should be covered, or is this not worth $10.99 since nobody played it and it's just not relevant? Meanwhile, there probably are some other games that could be recommended that are way more relevant, like Mega Man 11. Of course, my goal isn't inherently just to play everything everybody else has already played, but also I don't want to scratch the bottom of the barrel and play something just in the hope that I'll be the first person ever to have seen a game, because the odds of me being the first person to see a game and it actually being good kind of sucks. There's a low chance. This was a Kickstarter game and it has only one verified purchase, so maybe everybody who got it kickstarted it and activated it with a key. So yeah, 13 positive reviews versus 3 negative reviews. That is a danger, certainly, with Kickstarter, is that you very well may only have enough of a fan base as your Kickstarter backers, and that's it. But I imagine what we'll find out is that this is actually one of these Kickstarter games that's not finished and just abandoned. It's just not a good example of a game it wants to be. For every step it takes in the right direction, there's a misstep just around the corner waiting to infuriate and induce tedium, sometimes both in equal measure. Rather than dwelling on the negative, blah 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 blah, it keeps going. I wanted to like Tier imagine a challenging shooter, but with a time limit that encourages skipping through levels as quickly as possible and frustrating platforming sections. It's hard to recommend a game that doesn't make good on its initial promise. If you're looking for a challenging shooter, you're better off with something else like Rydo, or even Turrican 2, not recommended. A Mega Man 10 inspired platform shooter based on Norse mythology looks promising, but at this point is very early in early access. It's not labeled as early access anymore, but yeah. That doesn't really mean anything to me. That doesn't give me faith that this game has been finished and polished and is really good now. This developer has moved on to another game, and yeah. There's not really anything to say here. This is just not a relevant game again, so it leaves. Wanted to look at this game and see. Oh, it's not out yet. I keep seeing games that aren't out yet, and I'm like, I don't recognize that game, and it's like, no, of course you don't recognize the game. It's not out yet. I only look at games via a Twitter feed called What's on Steam, I believe, that tells you when a game actually hits its release date and comes out on Steam. If somebody makes a page and does not have a release date, it won't show me those usually. QURSTUV. So we are at U, so we are done with T. 3 hours and 8 minutes into the stream. I will say that next recording will be covering games starting at least with the letter U, but I imagine we will go through U, V, W, X, maybe Y, maybe Z. Next episode could very well be all the remaining games. There's a few games with Japanese characters at the end too, but I don't think it's more than a small amount, so there might be 2 more episodes, but I doubt there will be 3. That's going to be it for this recording. We got a lot of games decided on, although I did probably act a little too lenient on some games this time, and a lot of games are leaving the fall list to clean up the fall list quite greatly, and that is a very much an appreciated effort, and keeps the wish list nice and curated, which is important because, as always, I ask people to friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list as a way of supporting my channel. I also ask people to like and share and subscribe to this channel, comment if you wanted to down below. All of that helps me with YouTube, tells them that my videos are worth watching. And if you want to friend or follow me on any other social media sites, there's a bunch of links in the description. Also, there's a link to Patreon where you can support me monthly financially, which would also be very, very helpful. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.